Hello, and welcome back to the Arc of You podcast. My name is Noah, and I'm here once again with a very special guest. It's been a while. Our man in Texas, Mr. Nathan Stevens, joins us once again for our, I guess we're making this an annual tradition, our South by Southwest recap slash what you should be listening to, favorite albums of Q1, and maybe some most anticipated for Q2. Well, yeah, we'll get into all of it. But hello, welcome back to the RKV podcast, Nathan Stevens. How are you, sir?
Howdy, I'm good. Survived South by. I would say that that's the way to put that. You and I work on music stuff, and I was out of commission for a little bit because I thought I had vocal polyps,
We
which I
were,
do not, which
yes,
is good.
we got
But
a slightly better diagnosis, right?
yeah, yes, a much better diagnosis. Still needed some rest. Been playing some shows because I got better,
You've
all
been
that sort of
playing a
stuff.
lot of
I've
shows,
been playing
sir.
a lot of shows.
Yes, if you're not following, it's is it Makaija Music on
Makaija
Instagram?
music on Instagram, yeah.
Yes, and we will link that in the show notes. But if you're not following, stay up to date on all of the live outings. Yeah, you've been hitting it pretty hard.
Yeah. And then by the time this is out, you and I will have released a single. So,
Yes, I'll probably be dropping this either tomorrow, which would be Thursday from when we're recording this, which would be the day before our new single as Warehouses comes out. So maybe we'll intro with like the instrumental and then maybe the outro of this episode as we play just the first verse,
I
and
like
then
it.
we get a little tease and maybe we can get people to go purchase it. And maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that track at the end of the episode, something to stick around for. Okay. South by slash best things you've heard so far this year. Lay it on me. I'm gonna make a list. I will, maybe just as a tiny little side note and a fun, I don't know, fun story from the world of podcasting that maybe like four or five people who are listening to this can relate to. Did anybody else just recently get an email from Spotify saying, "Hey, we found some third-party music"? It's a whole different thing than I've experienced before. So we've had episodes pulled for snippets. That's part of why I stopped using copyrighted music and started using all of my own music as the bumpers on every episode. But we've been doing this for going on 9 years, so we have a lot of episodes. I had, I think, over like 150 that I had to go back through manually through Spotify. And you can do one of three responses, which is either I have the copyright and license for this, in which case they're like, okay, prove it and enter all the data relating to that. The second option is this falls under the banner of criticism, parody, blah, 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 etc., which we are, in most cases, a, a review podcast in some way, shape, or form, whether it be music, TV, movies, etc. So that's what I went with to hopefully avoid the wrath of UMG once again, because again, I didn't get a copyright strike on every episode that has music in it, only the ones from artists controlled by the fucking Universal Music Group. And that's Lucian Grange, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, Drake's daddy and all of that shit. What just again, I will point out we are on Spotify, but I will resoundingly say once again, fuck Spotify to into the dirt. But seriously, we are independent podcasters. I make no money off of this. I lose money doing this. This is for the love of the game. Like, Jesus Christ. And yet, God forbid, I play 30 seconds of a song that I'm reviewing or talking about and encouraging people that may, oh, go listen to it on your service. I'm not making any money off of your service. Like, who are you coming after, dude? I don't get, I just, yeah, so, and you get a very threatening message that's like, if you do not respond within the next 120 hours, we will assume you have the license and we will contact the appropriate license holders to confirm that you're allowed to use this. I'm like, guys, what are you doing? What are you
So is
doing?
it just like an email in a very Liam Neeson and Taken kind of tone?
Dude, it was very, yeah, I could show you some screen grabs. It was pretty intense. But just the most tedious process because I couldn't just blanket say, like, hey, all of this falls under the banner of criticism. Hey, maybe read the, like, hey, AI that's pulling all of this that I know they're using to read, like, oh, I heard a snippet of something. I'm like, hey, maybe actually read the episode description where it tells you, like, hey, we're reviewing this album, or I credited this song, like, in the show notes and, like, credited the artist. It's just. It's so frustrating. But you couldn't
Um,
blanket go through all of them and just say, "Hey, it was under criticism." You had to go through each individual song that was marked and do it. Yes, okay. So I
no,
needed a
for
vent. I needed a vent. I haven't said it to anybody yet, but that was annoying as shit. It took me 2 days basically of going through like manually a little bit on my phone, and eventually I broke down. I was like, I got to do this on the desktop. It's gonna be so much quicker. So,
I
uh,
wonder if I get away with it on the Woodhouse, my podcast, because it's all artist interviews.
mhm.
And I wonder if whatever your AI program that are obviously pulling these things say, oh, interviews almost always means universally positive coverage. So we want that. A review could be negative,
Right.
that sort
Well,
of thing.
like our Y episodes got tagged, and I was like, we literally had the lead singer, the songwriter, and the copyright holder for those songs on mic say, "Hey, I'm not going to sue you guys." Like, gave us
Okay,
verbal
that's amazing.
permission in
That's
the
amazing.
podcast that like it was okay to have used all of the music, and yet now they tried to get us, but. Anyway, so UMG, chill the fuck out. Spotify, pay your artist and stop demonetizing your smaller artists. We've talked about this before. You guys suck. Everybody, please go over to Bandcamp. I've been on Apple for the first part of the year. I'm doing a 3 month trial. I'm probably gonna stick with them. The sound quality is impeccable
Yeah, it's
compare
way better.
comparatively, it's like night and day. If you care at all about like if you are an audiophile, which I don't even know if I can rightfully claim considering my ears and some of the music that I produce, but it sounds better to me on Apple. That's all I'm saying. I'm hearing textures and layers that I haven't heard in some of my favorite songs. I'm just like, oh, that was there? Holy shit. Because I've been listening to it this other way for the last 10 years.
Well, I guess unfortunately, as we talk about South by, we need to start with a similar amount of musical political fuckery going on. Obviously, a couple of years ago, there were, weapons contractors and Lockheed
That was the big
Martin.
stink last year,
Yeah.
which we covered. So yeah, I have not heard anything about South by. As some people may be aware, there's like a fucking billion other things going on in the world right now. So what was the controversies? What was all of that boiled down to the South by experience? What invaded what uh what invaded South by?
No, so here's the thing. This is more of a future issue, and there was a lot of conflicting reporting on it. I am reporting on what the knowledge I have at the moment is, which is for the last couple of years, South by, especially post COVID, South by has been focusing more and more on the tech and film side of things and kind of having diminishing returns with their support of the music side of things. Part of that comes from a lot of South by music are unofficial or free shows.
Hmm.
Those sorts of things. Those are the things I prefer to go to anyway. And even last year, something that was really big that I went to that I really enjoyed was Stereo Gum, who I write for from time to time, their South by party, which was an unofficial show. South by made a big stink about it, all this stuff, and it seemed like they were kind of losing various media contexts they had to like host things officially through South by rather than just kind of being there during that week when everybody's there. So
Hmm.
last I've heard, and there's been a lot of, brouhaha, kerfuffle over this, is that they're cutting back on the music side of things. So there's not this like tail end weekend that's just music. The music will be running concurrently with the film side of things. So it'll just technically be a 5 day festival of music and film. That sounds fine in theory if you've not like followed how much South by has been fighting to not pay musical artists over the last couple of years. And of course, all of the controversy over having weapons contractors there and musicians being the first ones to really take a stand over that and dropping from shows. This feels a little bit retaliatory. And obviously, that South by really thinks that the tech side of things is either where they can make money or that they just don't want to put up with artists demanding rights for themselves and a moral clarity for things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's disappointing, but not surprising. And I could see this going towards what South by used to be. I'm not saying it was always great, but South by was just like this kind of random week in March where a bunch of bands would come through and they'd play at various different venues. And then it eventually became kind of an organized whole, had a corporation around it, all of these sorts of things. So that's where we need to start, just because things are shifting for the people that make music and don't get paid enough.
Yes.
And it
Uh,
sucks.
it does. As a person who puts a lot of music out into the world, not with the intention of making any money off of it, but to quote Jason Lee in Almost Famous, some money would be nice.
And going even beyond that, of like there was this whole thing that two separate entities within the city of Austin had passed a resolution, or at least a suggestion, that South by Southwest needed to pay artists who played on Austin property a certain amount of money, and they fought like hell to not do that. They eventually agreed to a bit of a pay bump, and now they're cutting back on things. Like you can see, you know, tech does this. They
Well,
will
and
fight and fight and fight and cut people.
as you said, branding it as like music and film and just crunching it all down, like you said, in theory, like, oh, that makes sense. But you're essentially now you're just dividing the attention span even further, where it's like you're gonna have to make those game time decisions of like, do I go see this band and give them a shot, or do I go stand in line for this screening that I may or may not get into, or vice versa.
Hmm.
And yeah, that's a bummer in as much as, again, as we probably talked about last year when we did this episode, I was like, dude, I still want to go at some point. It's still like one of my bucket list things. I'm like, kind of want to do it, but I also, every time I hear about it recently, just over the last several years, it's usually with a tinge of like, it's not what it used to be. It's not what it used to be, you know?
But
So
that's what I'm saying. That a lot of stuff that is bubbling
that's kind of
around.
every festival now,
Yeah,
though,
oh
right? It's not what
God.
it used to be, you know?
Yeah. And I think the thing that you can take solace in is there are people trying to create more cohesive communities outside of South by itself, instead using, the week itself when all these people are going to be in town is like a good excuse to just like throw things like house shows or unofficial showcases or things like that. So, you
Mhm.
know. Um, but so as we were talking about at the beginning, my thing right now is I'm going to try to wrap these things together, because my main highlights for South by also lined up with two of my favorite albums that have been released this year. So I'm going to try to wrap those together.
All right.
The first one, because this is chronological order, both of seeing this band and also when this album came out, was the LA electronic musician Baths. Um, Baths, I interviewed him for Best Albums of the 2010s over his album Obsidian, which I adore. It's pop electronic, but with heavy industrial influences. It is a wonderful, wonderful album. But his newest one, Gut, is just absolutely incredible. I don't know if this interview will be out by the time that this goes up, but I interviewed him over the album recently. It was just a absolutely fascinating interview, both about the music and also a lot of it is about queer sexuality and like, are you trying to make a domestic relationship with somebody that is just copying off of heteronormativity and finding those same pitfalls, or are you
Mhm.
creating something for your partner or partners that is new and fresh and creative and happy and fulfilling for you and whoever's involved? It was an awesome, awesome interview. And that album is just so textured, it's layered, it's really grotesque in some places, but really beautiful as well. He has talked a lot about the influence of Bjork over the last couple of years. And I think there's a lot of Bjork in this in terms of just this overwhelming spectrum of emotion and electronic textures. So the album itself, Gut, is one of my favorites of the year. And I got to see him do kind of a short set, but he did songs that are not even from that album, but from the next album. And it sounds like a noise group remixing Purity Ring. Like it is still catchy and poppy, and his voice is wonderful, but he is really diving into some extremes on this kind of like almost harsh noise, power electronics, even some gabber influences on some of this stuff. And so like that was the first album this year that really, really caught me. I was able to interview him and then I was able to see him live. So I got this kind of trifecta of really getting into and enjoying that album.
So I don't know that we discussed this, but I actually saw Baths live last year,
Hell yeah.
opening for Y on their The Well I Fell Into. tour for that album, which came out last year. So thank you for putting Gut on my radar because I didn't know it was out, but I think I heard these songs as they were being worked on, or
Hmm.
like probably, the album was in the process. So I think I've heard, I need to confirm basically if this is most of what I heard in that set, but incredibly compelling live. And I was familiar with him through Yoni's interview with him like way back on The Wandering
Hmm.
Wolf, but had never really like dove into any of the music. But seeing him live, I was like, holy shit. But I completely missed this one because again, I just switched over to Apple. So of course it doesn't know I like baths yet. So I have to tell it. I have to tell the algo. So
Um,
I will immediately adding that to my list. That's awesome. I did not know that was out. Cool.
it's absolutely fantastic. I think it is about as good as Obsidian. And like I just said, Obsidian was one of my favorite albums of the 2010s. So, you know, as high a praise as I can get on my side. I think the lyrical conceits in it are really, really interesting. Will is such a compelling singer and lyricist alongside this just hurricane force of electronic beauty and madness that he can create. I love his stuff so much. Just basically everything he's put out, I've really enjoyed. He also did the Bee and Puppy Cat soundtrack. That's him.
Yeah,
Um, yeah,
very
so
cool.
like he is a man of many different musical
I
talents.
just realized I'm wearing the hat I got from that night on the tour right now.
Nice.
If you can
Excellent.
see this
Yeah.
marigold on my head. Yes. Cra awesome. That
Um,
serendipitous, I think is the word I'm
yes.
looking for. Okay, so that's on the Q1 list for sure. Gut by Baths. What else is up there?
The second one, and this is the one I am wrapping in with South by as well. This was a band I really, really wanted to see. I caught them for a little bit at South by Southwest Stereo Gum last year. They are called Yahweh Nailgun. They are a hyper experimental noise rock band out of New York. Me and other critics who have like reviewed them or talked about them are kind of at a loss of like trying to figure out exact points of reference for them. There's some of the math rock of like battles. There's a lot of Death Grips influence, I would say, as well, especially within the drumming department. But really, it feels like they like fed all their influences through a wood chipper and then recreated an album from the debris.
A
Um,
10 song, I guess we have to call it an album, but I guess if we're going by length, an EP, 10
yes,
songs, 21 minutes.
yeah, 45 pounds
Holy
is the
shit.
new record. It is ferocious. I think it kind of steps into the history of New York hardcore music, just in terms of that visceral, pounding, very quick in and out, don't waste any time, lean as hell music.
If I may, I'm just gonna just give our listeners a run through the track list, which
Yeah.
is giving me a lot of joy right now. Penetrator, Castrato Raw, parentheses fullback, Pain Fountain, Animal Death Already Breathing, Ultra Shade, Beat My Blood Dog Down, Iron Feet, Tear Pusher, Sickle Walk. That sounds very intense. Blackout and Changer. Okay.
Black or
45 pounds. I'm
yeah.
I'm throwing that on, but probably not tonight, probably tomorrow, like when I'm in gridlock traffic in Charleston. Just yeah,
Oh
that
yeah,
sounds like the
there's
move.
some like primal scream stuff going on there. So the first thing I want to say is that these guys like very seem incredibly intense. They are some of the nicest people I've ever met. Zach, who is the lead singer, remembered me from a 2 minute conversation we had at South by the last year. Super, super nice guy. And Sam, who is the drummer, who is an absolute maniac on the drums, is without me prompting anything. I was just talking about trying to learn sickle walk on drums. Without me even asking, he's like, "Oh, I can write it out for you."
That's awesome, dude.
These are
What a cool
sweet,
guy.
sweet people.
Listen,
Um,
listen to the record. If for that alone, guys, where are you gonna get tidbits like that? Our man in Texas, dude. Hell yeah. Keep going, Nate. Keep going.
but yeah, I mean everybody in that, it's a four piece. Everybody in that band is so locked in. The guitarist and the synth player, and the synth player, I think this is part of the Death Grips thing that comes in, is that there's a lot of like warped, insane samples going on. And the guitarist is like treating the guitar as not a guitar. Like he is just trying to get weird textures and insane sounds of it. I didn't get a look at his pedal board, but it must have been crazy. They interlock so incredibly well together. Sam, the drummer who I just mentioned, really lays the foundation for all these songs with these hyper frenetic, really booming, clanking drum lines. And then the lead singer, Zach, is just like writhing, contorting on stage. It sounds like he's having to push all of the consonants up through his throat and they all have barbed wire over them. It is like a really, really intense listen, but the energy that I get from it is just like pretty incomparable to anything else I've heard this year. And their live show is absolutely stunning. I only got to catch them once during South by, but it's like everybody who was there was like, oh, that's the best show I saw this week. And they're coming back to Austin in April, and I will be front row seeing them again.
Dude, hell yeah. All right.
I again,
Golly, nail gun.
I don't know what to compare. And this is what feels odd if I'm like recommending them to people. They're like, "Oh, what do they sound like?" And I'm like, "The sound of a volcano collapsing on
Oh,
itself."
all right.
I don't, I don't know what to tell you. Um,
I can't wait. All right. And
I'm really
that just
curious on
came
your
out. That
thoughts.
was last
Yeah,
week.
that was
Okay.
last week, but I have been bumping it constantly. The singles that came out ahead of time, especially Sickle Walk, which I just mentioned is one of my favorite songs of this year. So those were the top two experiences from South by, and like I said, there was definitely like a cloud over it this year a little bit because it felt like we were kind of getting back to normal. Maybe South by is going to play nice with everybody, and then you kind of get this just gut punch, announcement at the end of South by of like, oh yeah, we're gonna start cutting back on the music. So like it
Yeah.
was a little somber as compared to some other things. I saw some good house shows. I played a show or two. I got to catch the Pacific Northwest band Lake, who were really really great. I played a show with them as well. I opened and they played right afterwards. They were
Nice.
fantastic. But there was this kind of like it is a very weird mutating moment for South by where I think the people who really care about music are going to be almost completely trying to move away in the next 5 years away from the corporation itself, the overhanging umbrella of all this, because
Mm-hmm.
I think people are just feeling like they're getting disrespected, which they
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
And that sucks. But yeah, on to
Well,
happier
and
thing.
I definitely think like I don't know. We'll see how everything shakes out, but I don't think a move to appease big tech is like gonna be the most popular
Nope.
move for corporations and different entities to make right now. I just want to put that out in the ether that like, hey, maybe read the room a little bit, but we'll see. We'll see. I don't know. I don't know. Um,
Um,
it has
but
been.
yeah,
Want to talk about invading? Like literally, my brother and I have been doing everything we can to like not let the outside world seep into like we just want to talk about movies and TV. Like
yeah, oh yeah.
but then Bong Joon-ho goes and makes Mickey 17, a movie about a fucking like the capitalist hellscape that we live in, and we had to fucking get into it, and I was just like, oh, we fucking derailed once
Well,
again. It's
well,
everywhere, man. It's fucking
so I
everywhere.
was gonna say on to happier topics, but probably the most like politically salient album so far released this year that is like this is rounding out my top three of this first quarter is the new Dark Side record. Nothing. Dark Side is Dave Harrington and Nicholas Jarre. Nicholas Jarre, who has been this kind of amorphous, elusive, hyper prolific electronic creator of since 2010, 2009, something like that. His solo work under his name is all excellent, but he released an album that was called 2012 to 2017 under the name Against All Logic, which is up there as one of the best dance and electronica records I've ever heard. And it was just like a collection of things that he kind of threw together. And Dark Side is kind of his rock project, I guess. It's hard to say. They recruited a drummer for this record in particular. They've gone from a duo to a trio, which has really added this like low punch to everything and explosiveness that I think they kind of lacked a little bit before. But the other thing is Nicholas Jarre is Palestinian and Chilean. So that means he knows how the United States can fuck up a place just out of a dick measuring contest.
Yeah.
Uh, so, and there's a lot of things on this album that are directly related to kind of the ongoing horrors. He makes fun of John Lennon's Imagine because he says, Imagine all the people in hell, is like kind
Yeah.
of one
So,
of his
I'm
things.
sorry. Is the album called Nothing?
The album is called Nothing.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, it is not a always a fun listen, I would say. But it is really beautiful in a lot of different ways. I think folks who are audiophiles, like we were talking about before, if you are an audiophile, one of the really impressive things about this is there's a lot of sampling and detuning and remixing that'll happen, and it will feel very lo-fi and really, really cramped, and you feel claustrophobic. And then suddenly something will shift in the production, and everything becomes like glistening and recorded in high depth. The sudden sharp pang of guitars or vocals will come through that sounds like they're right next to your ear rather than kind of in this amorphous haze. And like I said, because they've just recruited a drummer, I think they've added a new dimension in terms of these really interesting rhythmic backgrounds. There's a lot of Latin influence on these things, some cumbia influence as well, but not in a go to a club way. Just
Mhm.
like always these additions to this kind of dread that's going on. The lead single from that, Still No Center or SNC, is up there with Sickle Walk, which I talked about before as one of my favorite songs of the year. It is hyper catchy, really reminds me of like a mutated version of classic rock in
Mm.
some ways, kind of preying on those archetypes you would think from classic rock. It's incredibly catchy. It's got this crazy sampled chorus going on. Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. And if you want like to get a deep dive on it, my friend Daniel Bromfield did an amazing review on it over at Stereo Gum that I think
Okay.
really cut to the core of the message the album's trying to get across and also the influence as well. So, yeah, really experimental year so far for me. Very electronic influence, very experimental so far. Those are the three albums that I've come to and repeated again and again so far. And I know Yahweh's super new, but I've already
Yeah.
listened to it like 4 or 5 times, so I had to mention it.
Well, piggybacking a bit off of what you're referring to, just the dynamic kind of shifting,
Hmm.
like the textures opening up or kind of stopping on a dime. I haven't had a chance to fully digest it yet, but have you listened to any of the new Japanese Breakfast album?
Yes, I took a morning to listen to it. It did not hit me as much as Jubilee,
Same,
but there
but
are some beautiful
I'm
moments.
intrigued to go back to it exactly
Yes.
because of that, because of the production, which thought was pretty stellar across the board, even though I wasn't necessarily like enraptured by the album. But I think it's one of those that maybe a grower, but yeah, not as immediately engaging as Jubilee. But I do think, like you said, some gorgeous moments that I want to go back to. So I haven't fully digested that one. Uh, sorry, I didn't
Yeah.
mean to cut you off.
No, I was just gonna say those are the three, and there's some stuff like that one. There are some ambient albums that have come out. I really liked the new Weather Station record. It's very sophisti-pop, 80s indebted, and I feel like I need to take a day to just bike around with that album. That feels like the correct thing to do with that album. I just
Yeah.
haven't found time yet. But there's a similar thing of like the new Japanese Breakfast being like, oh, I need to come back to this in kind of the right headspace, because it's a gorgeous record. I'm just wondering if it's going to connect emotionally with me as well as like her previous records, specifically her debut Psychopomp, which I adore. So,
Yeah.
but
Uh,
what do you got for anticipated though?
so I got quite a few actually. Well, actually, is it all out? Nope, it's not. Okay, I got a list here. It's not necessarily in chronological order. I am uh, pretty excited about the new Pup record based on
Oh
the
yeah.
singles thus far. Uh, Morbid Stuff from 2019 is one of my, I think easily one of my favorite records of that decade for what it is. It was like, oh my God, this is like if all the emo that I listened to when I was in high school grew up and was like even fucking better, I guess, even harder. Uh, anyways, so their new one is Who Will Look After the Dogs. Incredible Incredible title and pretty ominous, but Paranoid was the first single they released. Incredible video for that one if you haven't seen it, that I highly recommend. That will be dropping in its entirety on May 2nd. So looking forward to that. My big one at the moment, I think we're still about a week away, would be Sable Fable uh,
Mm.
from Bon Iver, going kind of back to where everybody wants Justin Vernon to be, I think. Uh, I mean, I was a shift back in that direction, uh, but everything we've heard off of Sable Fable so far just feels like the self-titled, which I think is exactly what everybody wants. Incredible production. Let your voice be the star. Don't get too fucking weird with it, dude. Just relax. Just like, but who knows? Maybe the weird shit has not been released yet. Maybe there are
That's
those
my bet. That's my bet.
incredibly pitchy, sampled, take it or leave it sort of stuff. Oddly, my brother, who you've never met, and we have very different tastes in general on a lot of things, but we overlap quite a bit. He's weird. Like, if you were to meet him and talk to him, he's not a guy who you would assume is like, nah, dude, I ride or die for Justin Vernon. Like, he follows the features on all the other albums, and like he dude, when 22 a million came out, he was like, no, this is brilliant. And I was like, brother, I can't go on this journey with you. I'm sorry.
Okay, I was about to
Um,
say maybe I would get along with him well because that's my favorite Bon Iver record
that's your
is
favorite.
22.
I
Yeah.
mean, uh, and here's the thing I will say. A record that I revisit in fits and starts, but I've never gone back to since that era. And I definitely think my taste overall has shifted in such a way that I would probably fucking love it. I just
Mhm.
at the time it was definitely in fashion to talk shit about it. And I remember having a good time with as good a time as you can have with a Bon Iver record, which is, usually can be a heavy experience. Anyway, Sable Fable, I'm excited for it. We'll see. We'll
Mhm.
see.
I just wish it
But
was coming out in fall.
I mean, yeah, a perpetual fall into winter band
I
in my
don't know
mind.
why he releases
You
music
text
anytime before
you te
September.
you texted me recently asking like favorite winter records, and I was like, it's the most cliched thing possible, but the self-titled Bon Iver record, it's so like
Yeah, duh.
it just feels like winter. It feels like cold. Anyways, that comes out April 11th. Uh, who else? Who else? I had. Oh my gosh.
I have, while you're
Yeah,
looking, I
no,
have one
please vamp,
anticipated.
sir. Please do.
Yeah, one the big anticipated one for me, and this is just because of his incredible consistency. Billy Woods, rapper from New York, has a new one coming out called Gollywog. I would be over the moon about any new Billy Woods. I think Ethiopes, his one from 2020, I believe, is my favorite rap album of this decade so far, maybe my favorite album of this decade, period. And his last one, Maps, was not just great, but also I think like a perfect introduction to his work because it's a little less thorny than everything else he's done. The new one is produced by Kenny Siegel, who also did all of the production on Maps. It's him. It's this very jazzy, smoky beat. He's mostly talking about sex and the strange relationship, but everything's kind of through this almost like detective noir like feeling,
Okay.
which he got into a little bit. He gets into often. But if he gets a full record where he's just like kind of being almost like this detective moving in and out of people's lives and using that to explain troubles in his own life, troubles with capitalism, troubles with society in general, I think it could work really well with this kind of smoky, very back of the room, low light jazz rap that is happening with the production from Kenny Siegel and some of the other folks on this. So
Very good.
that's absolutely the thing I'm
I will
most excited
definitely
for.
get that on my radar because I did thoroughly enjoy Maps. I don't know why I blanked on it a second ago. My most anticipated record of the year comes out on Friday, the same day we're releasing our single, Glory from Perfume Genius.
Yes.
Completely forgot. Uh, it's hard to process these singles in isolation. I think they're awesome. I love them.
Hmm.
I don't know what else to say, but I need to hear them in context. Ugly Season, I like that one just. got richer and richer every time I would go back to it. And then
Such
also
a good album.
the accompanying opera that they released on
Hmm.
YouTube and all of that like helped, all of it as a total package. I was like so satisfied with at the end of it, but I like that was one of those like going into it, I was like, oh man, what happened? Like, what happened? It
Hmm.
wasn't, it was just like, oh, I wanted a whole other record of, you know, Set My Heart on Fire, or yeah.
Yeah.
And,
I
but the evolution album to album while still maintaining this like consistency throughout. I assume this is Blake Mills again, right?
hmm
On most of it. Uh, we got Aldous Harding guesting on No Front Teeth, which was the first single, I think the first single.
First single
Uh,
was It's a Mirror. The
Excuse me, It's
second,
a
yeah,
Mirror
yeah,
was the first
yeah,
one.
yeah.
And then it just dropped a third yesterday.
Hmm.
But I did not, I intentionally did not listen to it because I was like, we're so close. I don't want to, yeah. Uh, but yeah, I feel like at this point it's always an event whenever he puts out a new record. The teasing of this one has been pretty epic. I love all of the imagery associated with it, and I can't wait to just dive in for the next couple weeks after it drops on Friday.
I really, this is the thing. You never want to dive into hyperbole, but like Mike has never released a bad album. That's not hyperbole. That's just true.
It's just
There's
a
not
fact.
a
Yeah.
bad album in the Perfume Genius catalog, but the fact that he's been like, how many albums now are we into that everything is at a minimum an 8 out of 10 for me? And it's like, do
And
you
then we
start?
also have arguably like two just I think No Shape and Set My Heart on Fire immediately are pretty much stone cold 10 out of 10
No,
masterpieces.
no,
And
no
then
shape.
I think Ugly Season is like a hard nine, like a really
Yeah,
hard nine.
no, no shape is absolutely a 10 out of 10 for me. I think that is a perfect record. I have never been more beautifully emotionally devastated by a record than that. I adore it so much, and I don't actually listen to it to that much because it's like almost
Yeah.
too much.
Yeah, and I've gone
Um,
back to Too Bright honestly more than anything recently because it was an anniversary recently.
mhm.
And yeah, and that has some of
and
my
and
favorites
it's
as
got
well.
his song, which is Queen,
Yeah,
right? Like
that's
the
like a such a great like day starter. It works anytime, but that song just fucking rips anytime you hear it. I don't know. I absolutely I adore that song. And
but
if
I
you've
really
never
think
seen, sorry, I'm so sorry.
no, go
If you've
ahead, go
never
ahead.
seen the Letterman performance, which I think is the first network TV performance of Queen, you got to go back and watch that. Great shit.
But I really think he's getting into that larger category that we often associate with like Tom Waits or Bjork, of just like, this is one of those incredibly rare artists that has over 6 or 7 albums that like all deliver different things emotionally. They're very much like a chameleon, but they're still themselves through all of that. And like,
Hmm.
that's going to sound like hyperbole because it's fucking Tom Waits, it's fucking Bjork, but it's like, the dude has not missed at all and is continuously evolving at the same time. Like, no
Yes.
record is the same. And that is incredible. And I'm so excited for, yeah, I would not be surprised if this one immediately shot into that echelon I was just talking about for what I've heard so far this year, although with a probably a very different emotional palette than
Yeah.
everything I talked about.
Yeah. Uh, can't wait. Probably gonna stay up till I'm gonna watch The Pit Thursday night. I'm gonna stay up for an extra hour and then I'm gonna listen to Glory, which I'm assuming will probably be at least an hour long, and I'm just
Yes.
gonna pour over it. I cannot wait. Uh, yeah, I mean, I think that's a great one to go out on, but I
Hmm.
do want to say we're gonna play a little bit of the new single, which is called The Bopper's Gin, and it's off of our forthcoming LP. We don't have a date for it, but it is forthcoming. It's called Deadlines. We've been working on it for. This is so weird to say. Like, it sounds weird to say, but it's not weird. Let me explain myself. It's weird for me to say, yeah, we've been working on this thing for like over a year. Like
Hmm.
we genuinely have been working on this album for over a year. Um, and I've never worked on any of my albums for over a year. I
It
think the
turns out
long
doing the postal service thing is actually takes a while. Like doing it like across
it's
state lines takes a
it
while.
almost runs as slowly as the actual U.S. Postal
Postal
Service.
service. And
Yes.
that's not bad. I've liked how peek behind the curtain. I like how these things evolved. Both of us have things in our personal lives that we've had to take care of. Like I said at the
Yeah.
beginning, I kind of got knocked out for like a month at the beginning of this year. But I'm excited about it partially because it has evolved over time and taken its time. And neither of us, I
Same.
think, have felt rushed on it,
Absolutely.
which feels great.
Yeah. But we did both agree that it was time to like, hey, we should put out
Should put out a single.
at least one single that people haven't heard yet.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And I will say, from my perspective, this was one that as I was consciously made for to to have your vocal on it. Like it was as opposed to something I like pulled from the vault and was like, hey,
Hmm.
this might work. This was one I remember in the like physically sitting down and going like, okay, I'm trying to design something vibey that would sound good with Nate's voice.
And
And
it worked. I think
and
it
I
worked.
I think it worked really well. And when you first sent me back, like I was yeah, we're sitting here over like hyping up our own shit, but god damn it, like we like it. We
We
like it. And we
do
hope
like
you
it.
guys like it too. So
Yeah.
here is just the little snippet, just the first verse of the Boppers Gen from Warehouses, which you can listen to on Friday, wherever you get your music, but we would prefer that you do that on Bandcamp. And if anybody buys songs on iTunes, we do get money from that. You know, support.
I've Man, it would be so funny if we got an iTunes buy.
We got a huge iTunes following. Well, there was that one. We have one guy on Bandcamp who bought the first EP for $25. And I was like, dude, this is like they say on Bandcamp, they're like, you set your price low because people are more encouraged to be like, no, I'll overpay for it, like if I really like it. And sure enough, like some guy was just like, you know what? Good on him. So
Thank you, mysterious stranger.
yes. This is also my reminder to you on mic. You have access to the Warehouse's
Mhm.
Bandcamp, so you got to be responsible for posting the single, which I think I might need to send to you in an email, another WAV file if you don't have it handy.
Yes.
So I will do that. We will let the listeners listen. Thank you once again to our man in Texas, Mr. Nathan Stevens, for our South by Southwest recap and what you should be listening to in Q1 and what we're excited for in Q2. Everybody, go listen to Glory. Go check out our new single tomorrow, and stay tuned. That album's coming. Here's what I will say: it's coming out in 2025, so
Oh yeah.
it has the
Yeah.
potential to make you, dear listener, it might make your top 10. I don't know. And also, plug real quick here on the end. Personally, again, sometimes you got to hype yourself up. Genuinely, I say this completely selfishly and narcissistically. My favorite album of the year so far is called Emerald Garden Evening by a gentleman named Narc. I genuinely think it's the best ambient record that I've heard in 2025. I did make it, but I genuinely do think it's really good and everybody should check it out. Emerald Garden Evening, wherever music is listened to. Okay.
Only purchase on iTunes. Only purchase on
Yes,
iTunes.
strictly iTunes purchases and Bandcamp donations of $25 or more. That's what we're used to now, so that's what we'll be expecting from anyone and everyone who chooses to patronize us. Okay. Thank you once again. I seriously am going to end the episode now. Once again, Mr. Nathan Stevens, for the Archivy podcast, I have been Noah, and you've been listening to what we've been